Russian gas to Europe. The energy implications of the Kursk invasion go far beyond Russia. At Sudra, a pipeline sends Russian natural gas to the EU. While it may come as a surprise to many given the war in Ukraine, European countries like Austria, Hungary and Slovakia still buy gas from Russia, all of it flowing through the town of Sudra in Kursk. Sudra, located about 10 kilometers (6 miles) from the Ukrainian border, plays a key role in the transit of natural gas to the EU. An average of 42 million cubic meters (1.5 billion cubic feet) of Russian gas flows into Ukraine every day, the town playing host to a gas metering system that measures supplies flowing into Europe. Despite the war with Russia, Kyiv has allowed the gas to continue flowing through its Soviet-era gas pipeline unabated as part of a $2 billion a year contract between state-owned Naftogaz and Russia's Gazprom. Russian oil to Europe. The European Commission has said there was no immediate risk of oil shortages in Hungary or Slovakia after the two countries complained about Ukraine's decision last month to place sanctions on Russian supplier Lukoil, which transits exports to the two countries via the war-torn country. While the EU as a whole has moved to diversify its oil and gas supplies away from Russia, the two eastern members have continued to receive oil via the Soviet-era Druzhba, Friendship, pipeline, and Ukraine's move prompted Budapest and Bratislava to demand intervention from the Commission. The Druzhba oil pipeline has remained functioning following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, even as the EU weaned itself off most other sources of Russian energy. The southern branch of the pipeline runs via Ukraine to the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary, and has been the primary source of supply for their refineries for years. A few countries in the EU were given temporary dispensation to continue receiving Russian oil in December 2022 when the EU began to sanction Russian oil supply into Europe. That temporary dispensation was offered to give the countries time to set up alternative, non-Russian supply sources. In the nearly 3 years since, Hungary has not attempted to arrange alternative suppliers, they have instead increased the dependence on Russian oil, and Orban has put Hungary at risk of energy meltdown as the EU was always committed to cutting off Russia entirely. Hungary and Slovakia used a sanctions carve-out to keep pumping it in. Hungary has even ramped up Russian oil imports. Only around 3% of Europe's crude oil supplies now come from Russia, the EU claims. An alternative pipeline route through Croatia has sufficient spare capacity to meet the needs of both countries. The argument comes at a time of increasing diplomatic tensions between Brussels and Budapest. Ukraine is now blocking the transit of pipeline crude sold by Russia's largest private oil firm, Lukoil, effectively stripping the two countries of a third of their oil imports. Szijjartó from Hungary warned in an interview on Hungarian television station ATV last week that until the issue of oil transit is settled, Hungary would continue to block €6.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine through the European Peace Facility. He claims that Lukoil currently accounts for 1/3 of Hungarian oil imports and around 45% of Slovakian oil imports, making the Ukrainian ban a fundamental threat to the energy security of both countries. This is an unacceptable and incomprehensible move by a country that wants to be a member of the European Union and that, with a single decision, puts the oil supply of two EU member states at fundamental risk, he said. Slovakia and Hungary, two countries that have opposed Western allies' military aid to Ukraine as it fights Russia's invasion, have complained to Brussels about Kyiv's move to put Lukoil on its sanctions list, saying it prevented them from buying Russian oil for their refineries, threatening security of supply. Hungary and Slovakia have gone to the rule book, arguing the penalties violate a 2014 trade deal between Kyiv and the EU and asking the European Commission, the EU's executive, to intervene. Remember how Hungary ignored the August 19 deadline to respond to the EU about their concerns of Hungary relaxing visa restrictions for Russians being allowed to, encouraged to come to Hungary. The EU set out its concerns that Hungary's actions are a substantial security risk for the European Union and the Schengen free movement, which Russia can now take advantage of and infiltrate the EU with belligerent actors. Hungary chose to ignore the EU's request and missed the deadline. Meanwhile, after months of using its veto in the EU Council to delay sanctions against Russia and block EU aid to Ukraine, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán sparked outrage when he used the first weeks of his country's turn as chair of intergovernmental talks to conduct a unilateral peace mission to Moscow and Beijing. Fast forward to August 23, 2024. News has broken that the EU have ignored and refused to meet with Vatnik Sijatu to discuss his concerns about Lukoil oil now being sanctioned. A major blow to the pro-Russian relationship dictator Orban established with Putin. Fast forward to today. Two can play the ignore game. Brussels, August 23, Reuters. The European Commission has declined Hungary and Slovakia's request that it mediate a consultation procedure with Ukraine over sanctions imposed by Kyiv on Russian oil producer Lukoil, a Commission spokesperson said on Friday. Commission services have preliminarily concluded that urgent consultations do not appear to be warranted, the spokesperson said. The spokesperson said Brussels had no indication Ukraine's sanctions had caused a risk to European security of energy supplies, since Russian oil was still flowing through the Druzhba pipeline that links Russia, via Ukraine, to the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary. It appears that the sanctions imposed by Ukraine on Lukoil do not affect ongoing oil transit operations via Druzhba carried out by trading companies, as long as Lukoil is not the formal owner of the oil, the spokesperson said. Checkmate Orban. Get in line Vatnik, follow the European Union's policies and principles or pay the price.